I don't know about you, but I've seen enough twists on General Hospital over the years to know that when an old flame suddenly drifts back into Port Charles, it's almost never just a coincidence. That's exactly the feeling I got the moment I heard Vaughn was back. My first thought wasn't about another WSB mission or some secret operation. I kept wondering about Josslyn. Sometimes the biggest surprise in this town isn't who comes back, it's who they're meant to find when they do. From where I'm sitting, Josslyn has been carrying far more than anyone her age should have to handle. Ever since she threw herself into the WSB world, it feels like every step she takes comes with another sacrifice. The young woman who once had room in her life for laughter, romance, and dreaming about the future now seems trapped in a never-ending cycle of danger. I'll tell you what, that's a heavy price to pay no matter how tough someone tries to look. Right now, the saddest part is that Joss doesn't even know what's happening around her. She's being held captive at Windermere after Cassius Phazon kidnapped her, completely cut off from everything outside those walls. While she's fighting to survive, life in Port Charles keeps moving without her, and one of the biggest changes is something she would never expect. Vaughn has quietly returned. That little detail caught my attention more than I expected. 8 months isn't exactly forever, but it's long enough for people to convince themselves they've moved on. The thing is, Josslyn and Vaughn didn't split because they stopped caring about each other. Their relationship was ripped apart the moment Jack Brennan discovered they were more than partners. As head of the WSB, Brennan wasn't interested in hearing excuses or giving them another chance. Rules were rules, and he made sure those rules came first. Vaughn was immediately reassigned, and just like that, two people who looked genuinely happy together were forced onto separate paths. I've always believed there's a big difference between a love story ending naturally and one being cut short by someone else's decision. That's why Vaughn's return feels different to me. It doesn't feel like the writers are simply bringing back a familiar face. It feels like they're reopening a chapter that never really had a proper ending in the first place. And that's what makes this situation so interesting. Josslyn has no idea Vaughn is back in town, while Vaughn has returned to a Port Charles that's changed dramatically since he left. Folks, that's the kind of setup this show loves. Two people separated by duty, secrets, and bad timing suddenly find themselves on the same chessboard again. Whether fate is giving them another chance or preparing them for another heartbreak, I can't help thinking their story is far from over. When I started piecing all of this together, I found myself thinking that Vaughn's return may be a lot more meaningful than it looks at first glance. I've watched General Hospital long enough to know that the writers rarely bring back a familiar face just to have them walk through a few scenes and disappear without leaving some kind of mark. Even when a character only stays around for a short time, there's usually a reason behind it. That's why I can't help paying attention to every little move Vaughn makes during this visit to Port Charles. From what we're seeing, Vaughn isn't back because he's looking for old friends or trying to settle unfinished personal business. He's back because the WSB has another crisis on its hands, and that immediately tells me something important. Despite everything that happened before he left town, the agency still trusts him with sensitive assignments. That says a great deal about how valuable he remains. If the WSB had truly lost confidence in Vaughn, they could have easily sent another agent. Instead, they chose someone who already understands Port Charles, knows many of the people involved, and has experience handling situations that can change in the blink of an eye. One thing I've always appreciated about Vaughn is that he never comes across as someone who enjoys creating unnecessary drama. He's focused, calm, and usually thinks several steps ahead. Those qualities seem to be on full display again as he begins gathering information connected to Jason Morgan and Valentine Cassadine. These aren't ordinary names in Port Charles. Whenever Jason or Valentine becomes involved in a storyline, secrets have a way of multiplying, and every decision seems to carry consequences for several other characters. Vaughn walks into the middle of that storm without hesitation, almost like he's picking up where he left off months ago. Then we have his meeting with Britt Westbourne, and I have to admit, that scene really caught my attention. It reminded me that the WSB never truly lets go of unfinished business. Vaughn makes it clear that the agency still has expectations regarding the cold serum prototype, and he isn't there to make friendly conversation. He's representing an organization that always seems to have another agenda hidden beneath the surface. I found that fascinating because it shows Vaughn balancing two different sides of himself. On one hand, he's carrying out orders exactly as expected. On the other hand, you can still sense that he's a person who understands the complicated relationships inside Port Charles. That balance has always made him more interesting than a typical government agent. After speaking with Britt, Vaughn shifts his attention toward Danny Morgan to discuss Jason. That may seem like a small moment, but I don't think it's small at all. Every conversation Vaughn has appears to be another piece of a much larger investigation. He's quietly connecting people, collecting information, and trying to understand how everything fits together. That's the kind of storytelling I enjoy because it rewards viewers who pay attention instead of simply waiting for the next big explosion or shocking twist. Sometimes the quiet scenes are the ones that matter the most later. Now, I've also heard that Bryce Durfee is only expected to appear in 2 episodes during this return. I understand why some fans might be disappointed by that. After waiting nearly a year to see Vaughn again, 2 episodes doesn't sound like nearly enough. But I'll tell you something I've learned after all these years watching daytime television. Never assume that a short appearance is the end of the story. Soap operas have a habit of bringing characters back for brief visits to remind viewers that they still belong in the world of the show. Once the audience starts talking about them again, the writers often find another opportunity to expand their role. In fact, I almost wonder if that's exactly what's happening here. Vaughn's return feels carefully timed rather than accidental. The writers could have waited until another storyline, yet they chose to bring him back while so many changes are taking place around Josslyn. That timing immediately makes me think there could be a bigger plan unfolding behind the scenes. What really strengthens that feeling is the fact that Jack Brennan is no longer standing in the way. The last time Josslyn and Vaughn were together, their relationship wasn't destroyed because they lost interest in each other or because trust had disappeared. They were separated by WSB policy. Brennan enforced that policy without hesitation, making it clear that agents couldn't pursue a romantic relationship while working together. Vaughn was reassigned, and just like that, their future together was taken out of their own hands. I've always felt there was something unfair about that because neither one of them truly chose to walk away. Now the circumstances look very different. Brennan's influence has faded, and the pressure that once surrounded Josslyn has eased considerably. That alone changes the conversation. Sometimes removing a single obstacle opens doors that seemed permanently locked before. If the biggest reason they couldn't be together no longer exists, then naturally I'm going to wonder whether fate is preparing to give them another opportunity. There's another possibility that I find even more interesting. Everything Josslyn has endured during the Cassius phase and nightmare could completely reshape her future. Being kidnapped, manipulated, and forced into another dangerous WSB situation would leave lasting emotional scars on anyone. If those experiences convince her that she's had enough of agency life, then walking away from the WSB becomes a very real possibility. And if she leaves, suddenly the rules that once controlled her personal life disappear with them. Personally, I'd welcome seeing Vaughn become a regular part of the canvas once more. He brings a steady presence that balances many of the larger personalities around him, and his chemistry with Josslyn always felt genuine to me. If this short visit is only the first step towards something bigger later this year, I honestly think it could become one of the more satisfying stories to watch. Sometimes the most meaningful reunions don't begin with grand declarations. Sometimes they begin with a quiet return that reminds everyone a story was never truly finished in the first place.